So for me, though, what I'd like us to think about here as a group and a forum is really a sort of, a three-step thing, really. Think about, who we really are, and what we really enjoy about the work that we do at the moment, in the context of what that future world might look like. I think it's going to be a while before organisations recover to full strength in terms of the vacancies that they have. They won't think, a trend in a report from McKinsey, which I can send to you if you like, although it has caveats within it. It's saying that they'll want to get their houses in order a bit before they start recruiting. A friend of mine who's very senior in Shell was telling me when I bumped into him on a dog walk the other day, all about the cuts that they're making. And then these aren't cuts in terms of people necessarily, but they're cuts in terms of process. I think when you strip back to working remotely, you realise there's a lot of stuff that goes on in offices that's just sort of not padding, but it's process, and it's things that aren't perhaps as necessary anymore. If I turn our attention to recruitment and the amount of technology that's in it already, and likely to explode, I think, now, because there are many programs out there who can do a degree of candidate sifting and all that type of thing, Robo-Recruiter and others. If we think about that, there's an opportunity for people within organisations to really think about what aspects of the work that they enjoy. If I take myself back, I much preferred the client engagement side than the candidate engagement process. So definitely, as soon as I could, by 1989, I was doing much more client-facing work. And yes, shortlisting and working through and managing recruitment processes to clients, but more and more I was empowering people, often junior people who were working with me, to see that through. And so that's kind of me, if you like. I've done 360 recruitment at times in my life. I did a spell in the mid-noughties, but I wouldn't say that that's a strength of mine. And I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the 360 recruiter is under a whole load of pressure because they're having to do things that aren't naturally within their skill set. And so in the whole 360 role, from finding it, killing it, eating it, skinning it, whatever, preparing it, eating it, it is not in every single recruiter's natural skill set. In fact, often I've seen new business people aren't particularly good at relationship management, for example. I mean, there's a guy I worked with many, many years ago, and I've seen many since, he had 30 contractors out in pretty much 20-something different accounts. He was more interested in the thrill of getting in somewhere new and doing a deal than he was in opening up the opportunity, behind that. So obviously I aligned myself with him to capitalize on opportunities that he was creating. I've said for some time, I think that recruitment could pad out to be more of a team sport. And I think also there will need to be technologically leveraging or being a linchpin, as Seth Godin calls it, of that type of technology. Because definitely there'll be pressure on recruitment costs and margins, and there'll be pressure on recruiters and candidates to take lower salaries possibly. We had situations in 2002 in Deutsche Bank where they were doing contractor margin rounds of cuts. I think they did 3 in the end, where they were calling all the contractors in and just cutting their rate back. And the argument was, well, look, if you don't want it, I can go and find, there's plenty of available contractors out there with your skills who I can hire in. Which I think, the long-term effect of that, of organisations treating external staff like that, often they treat internal staff in a similar type of way, which can lead to, and I think we will see, a lot of people have been furloughed. Most people, it doesn't have a huge impact yet. However, I think people are going to think, possibly they could think, when I welcome your views, it could change their perspective about how the organisation they work for and thought they had some sort of level of security with, has altered, hasn't it? Their values will shift. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that's likely to happen. We're not too sure what direction yet. So we've already had a few clients ask us to push down our margins on some candidates, which isn't too surprising, but we're resisting successfully at the moment.
Yeah. Okay.
With those clients, we've got a good long-term relationship, and we know that their own position is actually fairly secure in their market, so they're unlikely to have too many problems or repercussions because of it. But we saw this in the last recession where people were cutting margins significantly. We've got to a point now where we've got them back up really to where we wanted them to be. So I suspect they may go down a bit. It depends how long this goes on for, and I think that's a difficult thing at this point, is that no one's entirely sure whether we'll still be in this position in 6 months or a year, trying to work out whether business is going to get back to normal. And if it's 6 months, that's very different to a year. And I think a year of everyone working remotely will change things far more significantly than if it's, say, 3 months.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the like we were saying earlier on, it's the health versus the economic impact, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're in this state of sort of suspension of it at the moment, but there must be people in the UK and other places. Well, there are. We've seen in China, obviously, very different society, but there are, the level of poverty and impact that's happened post-coronavirus, where people not being able to get back to work just straight away, like my job's furloughed, okay, bang, I'm straight into a job.
Yeah.
And Spain, the impact there is really cutting deep right now. I think some talk about whether we're at the peak. We seem to have stabilised, don't we, at a horrendous total of 500 deaths a day, I think, for the last couple of days or so.
Yeah.
So for my mind, I think staffing services will continue to be there. And I think there will be an element of what's done in-house and what's done out-house. I don't say this is the end of the recruitment industry. I mean, in 2002 onwards, RPO definitely found its feet there because it was offering shared models based on shared cost savings to clients, not simply just marked up recruiters on site, which again was a better option. But, so I think, well, certainly my man who took his business from 30 to 2, his idea is we'll seek new ways to capitalize. And he's not a guy who's going to discount. We'll seek new ways to capitalize around people services with clients. And that can look in like many different things. Again, in the 80s, 90s, we had a product called MRS, and we did it again in, excuse me, I did it again in a different world with in the pharmaceutical world. And MRS was literally an employee leasing scheme. We did it also within the public sector. So you would hire the permanent staff with back-to-back contract notice with the client, and the client would therefore have a permanent staff with a margin on rather than a contractor. Yeah? So ultimately the cost was lower to the client.
Yeah.
But they still had that flexibility which they wanted, which a lot of people come out here not want to reload their P&L with lots of costs. They're going to be pouring over those costs. So I definitely think one of the skill sets I could see in demand is going to be procurement for sure. That's, supply chain review, procurement, those sorts of areas. In fact, I work with a company, Andy and I, they're dealings with a company that are in that space. So these are the sorts of things where I think we will see demand. You're in the technical world, aren't you, Henry?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I think we'll also likely to see changes to the contract market. In addition to the changes with IR35, the government has been making significant noises saying that with the extra funding that they've put in for the self-employed, that there are going to have to be changes around the tax system and the way that they pay in. And I suspect that will mean that there are probably going to be fewer people who want to go down the contract route, as well as fewer companies that want to take them on.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. And companies get very cynical then about contractors who only want to take permanent jobs because there aren't any contracts around. They think, well, as soon as they'll be gone again. All that objection handling is fresh in my mind. Well, he's the best person for the job. What's the average tenure of a permanent person compared with the average tenure of contract? those sorts of things.
Yeah.
One of the things we introduced, definitely in the pharmaceutical world, because we were quite early adopters, was the idea of we would go into clients when they were trying to negotiate on fees. We'd look at the tenure of our people. So, and there was one occasion where a large clinical research organisation called us in for an audit and was trying to push the margins down. And we produced his spreadsheet. It was not mine, it was Adam Marsh, very clever guy who now works in TechStream Global. But he went in with his spreadsheet and he could demonstrate to the client, look, what's your average tenure of these people? The client said, well, 2 years. He said, well, look, let's look at, here's all of our placements over the last 3 years and no one's left yet. So you're getting 50% more at this stage, am I right? 50% more in terms of your return on the recruitment investment, the placement investment that you made. So almost like we could demonstrate the fees were more, they'd got a better return on somebody who'd stayed there for more than 3 years than someone who'd stayed there for 2, even if they'd paid a lower fee. Paul, are you back?
I'm back on a mobile, so hopefully that works.
Okay, I think Andy, were you just going to say something?
Yeah, it was more of a question in terms of the recruitment as a team game and how the furloughed recruitment consultants will be able to fit back in, because they'll be 4, 5, 6, whatever weeks behind in terms of new development opportunities, and will come in to admittedly smaller teams and potentially a rush of opportunity for contract, maybe over perm to start with. But I'd not considered that. But how that sort of team structure would work, and if you've ever seen, or if anyone's ever seen that happen before, where you're sharing stuff you would ordinarily have kind of guarded a lot more closely, whether you want to do it or you're required to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so it's interesting. Furloughed employees are allowed to do training, aren't they, and work and that kind of thing. Now, whether they could effectively make calls and interact with candidates and clients over the course of that time, if they're not transacting, I don't know the ins and outs of the laws on that, I'm afraid. But
I don't think so. Check email, which I would think then means check it and forward it to someone who isn't furloughed, and there's maybe intermediary agreements in place on a company level. But I don't know.
Well, the other thing that will be really different is relationships matter. And when we're in a scramble for skills, and even clients who are relationship driven, a decent CV lands on the desk, they're going to entertain it from that agency. They might try and push them down or do something else with the candidates they get them through process. However, they're probably going to look at the candidate if it's a very short supply area. When supply will increase, which it will, the relationship starts to kick in. And so I think the wise recruiter now is remaining in contact. Now, whether they can do that just from a personal perspective to say, hi, I'm on furlough and I wanted to keep in touch, how are you doing? Whether that's deemed as work or not, I don't know the answer. It'd be interesting to know, though, wouldn't it? I think definitely the team approach, I mean, it exists, doesn't it? I mean, the very successful business I did some work with last year, average billings per consultant of 17 grand, which is like nearly double the industry average per month, actually, 17,000 a month. And the number of split deals that occurred in that business, which essentially is the team base, someone's found the candidate, someone else has managed the client, someone else has played, whatever it is, someone else has found the client and someone has managed those two sides. So it has been happening to a degree anyway in some instances, but whether that's formalized, like in organizations like Michael Page or Robert Walters, when they pay a bonus, your bonus is higher if you bill a lot and you're popular or you're a team player than if you bill a lot and you're not, sort of thing. But arguably, it's not a lot different from commission. But they always used to make a big deal of that with clients. If anyone's got anything to add, then please do. Otherwise, I'll reintroduce Paul on his iPhone. Are you standing in the middle of a field somewhere to get signal?
I am, yeah. No, experiencing some connectivity issues at the moment. So, one of the new ways of working, I suppose.
Yeah.
No, it's funny
Fire
what you're
away, Paul.
saying. Yeah, no, it's funny what you're saying on, you know, on furlough and what employees can and can't do, because you know, my understanding is, yeah, as long as they're not contributing to the revenue of the business, then it's okay. So they can do check-ins with candidates and with, you know, and with clients, although clients probably is a little bit more questionable. I suppose the other thing, what that leads to is the mindset of the consultant, because as far as they're concerned, they're furloughed, you know, they're not running the business, they're getting paid, you know, X amount, 80% of their salary, capped at $2,500. And there's this sort of, you know, it's been put out there that they're not supposed to be working for that fee. So I think there will be a mindset shift with consultants and a reluctance maybe to get involved, and seeing this maybe as a holiday for them. So I think, you know, it's as much about a mindset change as it is about the actual parameters of what furlough is.
Yeah, I'm taking that on board, Paul. I think that, you know, values, as you know, values is a big part of the work I do, values elicitation. If we elicit the values of someone prior to and post some sort of event in their lives, such as marriage, death of a relative, moving house, all those sorts of things, new birth, new child, you know, those kind of things, values do shift. And we think now, if you've been furloughed and you were earning a decent chunk of commission and all of a sudden you're now on $2,500 a month and you can't work, there's definitely going to be an impact, because recruiters tend to gear up their lifestyle, don't they? Or arguably they can't go out and they're not commuting to work, and there's a lot of savings there. There's still, their rent might be best part of $2,000 a month. So, you know, there's possibly a big impact there, and I think that will have a knock-on effect in terms of their future loyalty or how they think about work. I'll be surprised if one of the staggering facts is that we were doing some research into this earlier in the year, and the number of recruitment businesses that have opened in the last year compared with previously, it's normally high, but it was quadruple the amount. Between triple and quadruple the amount of new businesses that are opening, new recruitment businesses. So that means there's a huge proliferation going on, and I wouldn't be surprised if that doesn't continue. And in the US, they might have a contract consultant who's got a limited company and an exclusive contract with one client, and they just supply that client. The client controls the margins and everything else, and the contract, so they've got a relationship at arm's length. But that if you like, company is effectively, there's only one client, and it's completely hamstrung by that client in terms of the margins they can charge and what they can do and everything else. But it's a trend. It saves the client a whole load of money, doesn't it? And still keeps a lot of the benefits of having agency supply.
I think there, Ben, I think you touched upon an interesting point, just in terms of having that sort of one client. If you sort of broaden that out a little bit further and look at those agencies that are working in specific sectors. I was sitting in on a webinar not dissimilar to this, the latter part of last week, and they were talking about the sort of fallout from the crisis, and in particular the sectors or areas that they generally felt were sort of predicted to do okay. I think, you know, if you're sitting in those sectors, and I can't remember exactly, but it was things like defence was seen as a strong area, transport, excluding the air, telecoms, waste management. That was another area. I think if you're sitting in those areas, then, you know, taking back the point earlier, if you are able to ride it out sort of 6, sort of 9, 12 months, then it could be quite rosy coming the other side. I suppose the flip side of that, if you're sitting in areas and supporting and putting contractors, perms, temps into sectors that is not predicted are going to come out quite so rosy, or if they do, it's not going to be quite so swift, then perhaps there needs to be a slight realignment of what you're doing. As I touched upon before, you know, we specialise predominantly in that sort of inclusion and diversity space, but actually over the course of the last 2 weeks have developed a whole raft of new programs that basically support organisations to support their staff working remotely. So I think, you know, if you're an agile company that has the capability to do that, then you're going to be quite strong. The flip side of that, I suppose, once again, is if you're not, then you're probably going to struggle. So it's I think that sort of sectorial approach could be an interesting one moving forward.
Yeah, good comments, Jonathan. I think this idea of, because when I last year I did quite a lot of work for an organisation in terms of talent attraction for them, and the number of recruiters who would move for the job if it involved just flexibility in working was very, very high. And this company, like many others, has a sort of pretty much an 8 till 6 standard sort of culture. But I'm going to be interested to see how many people who are in those numbers who've now tried it and think, well, it's not for me. I think most people don't want to be told off if they're 5 minutes late, and regardless of how late they worked the previous night, that still does happen. However, I think a degree of flexibility rather than actually the need for work. It's interesting what Barclays have done. So a friend of mine has done all of the design and implementation of Barclays flexible working centres, and keeps promising me a visit. I've not been yet, over in Canary Wharf. But they've effectively got these centres where people can satisfy that need to go in and work with others. Obviously, if you're in your team, you're not, or whatever, booking group pods and that kind of thing can be a challenge. But there's a whole load, and so these offices have become more like, obviously they've got meeting places, they've got working spaces, rather like a WeWork where you work, don't you, Andy? So giving that, and also it can have much more, sort of a very different feel to it. So many recruitment companies now, and they're like I worked in the 80s and 90s, rows of desk phones, people on headsets, not a lot different from a sort of, a call center type of environment, which, again, there's some horror stories there about the sort of pressure of KPIs and things that are put on people. So, yeah, I hope that what comes out of the other end of this is the sort of the output-driven culture, where we're not looking at how many hours someone's at their desk, because as Rhonda, our colleague, will tell you, that's presenteeism. And if people are forced to be at their desk for 10 hours a day, it doesn't necessarily increase their productivity. If they're told they can go by 3 if they get it done, you tend to see a real spike in work ethic and work practice for very little qualitative or quantitative impact on their output. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think this sort of period now, it's, again, we've been through sort of some of the impacts and, the things that we've seen and experiences that we've had over the last sort of 4 weeks. And, again, there's definitely a lot of, there'll be a big impact, as everyone knows, across many different industries to this. But, again, I think, what we've got to do really, we're in a situation where, most people are stuck indoors. There's not much work going on. So now is, a great opportunity to really look at, what life will look like on the other side and what practices and what things, will change. And I think, back to the home working thing, that was, the 9 to 5 working week was something which was brought in 1920 by, Ford Motors. That's 100 years ago. And, we've still been working predominantly in that 9 to 5 sort of world. And I think now, after 3 months, you talked about major events and how that shifts people's perspectives. I think that, for me, home working will be one of the big things that does change across recruitment, because I think many people work from home, see how productive they can be, and also how enjoyable life can be, where you've got more time because you're not traveling and everything else. You'll be more productive to take on the other aspects. So, looking after yourself, spending more time with your family, and, be more productive in the workplace. And I think businesses now will be looking at how they adapt and how they can, sort of build these virtual cultures, within recruitment businesses where, people are operating remotely.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Paul. I mean, I was on a call this morning. We were a raft of sort of clients talking about how they convert face-to-face to sort of virtual training. And one of the ladies there was an operations director at Deloitte, and she, what she was saying, they're not as busy as they have been. Obviously, that sort of face-to-face contact with their clients isn't there. But what it is enabling them to do from a learning and development perspective is actually they've got more space for their employees to actually perhaps do those learning programs that they haven't done before, because they've been, back to your point, Ben, 8 8 till sort of 10 every day, head down in sort of client projects, but suddenly there's a whole new world to them, and they can do that e-learning, they can look at those modules, and I think that in the longer term, back to what Paul said there, I think is really quite interesting. If people can get over this initial hurdle of, God, I've been 30 years going to the office, sitting next door to this sort of person, having that chat at 11 o'clock at the coffee, all this sort of stuff, thinking actually, if my organisation can get over the bias of actually people working at home and that level of sort of presenteeism, it could really completely revolutionise or certainly open up a whole new world to things that people just have not experienced before, which could be, absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Agreed. I mean, there's already evidence of the virtual coffee, isn't there? Because so many recruiters are talking about this, where they'll get a coffee, they'll ring up the client, they've got a coffee, or a candidate, whoever it is.
We have virtual 11s.
All right, brilliant. Yeah, brilliant.
Quite cool.
Yeah. I mean, does it substitute? I mean, look, I'm completely converted to remote working because it's what I've been doing for the last 20 years in many ways, although I've worked on sites for amounts of time and I'd never observed their hours of work necessarily. I mean, I wasn't flout them, but I certainly didn't feel like I'm here from 8 till 6 as well. What I've noticed is it's almost impossible with children around. But would children over time, if they were going to be more and more home educated, would they in time, I mean, I think from a social perspective, it's essential. It's important for kids to go to school. If any of mine said they didn't want to, they could be homeschooled, no problem. I would have thought until this time when I realised, no.
Exactly.
Try as I might, I'm probably getting really about 3 or 4 hours work done a day, and that's it. It's very hard. And I know couples home, both trying to work in full-time jobs and swapped, a lawyer and a telecoms guy who live next door. They've got 2 children at home. And that routine of home working's already eroded, and it's chaos.
Yeah, I think also as well, it's client side. It's not just, us as individuals and the organisations that we work for, but, as recruitment businesses, the clients that we serve are also going to, I imagine, experience a similar thing with more people working remotely. And, I think, when we're talking about value add for clients in the new world when we're on the other side, I think, as we're dealing with HRDs and taking requirements from our clients, those individuals that we place are then going to work for line managers who are working remotely. So, one value add that I was talking about with, a colleague the other day was just, we could provide a service where, with new starters, we can collect feedback on, post-placement. We could collect feedback for them on line manager performance, onboarding processes and all that kind of stuff. So as businesses transition, some of the value that we could add is providing data and feedback on their business and how it's performing, in relation to onboarding new staff and new starters.
Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of my work when I was back a recruitment consultant was with investment banks, and they had virtual teams, different time zones right back then. So they'd been remote managing people, remote leading teams for years and years and years, and 3 decades ago. I think, it's a different art, isn't it? And, so I'm conscious we've shot over time, and I'm more than happy to have more of these if you guys are enjoying it. Or, we can continue on for another little while if you want. It's up to you.
I'm good up till 1, but I've got a call.
Okay.
I had a question. As we're all working or running sales businesses in one form or another. When people think is a good time to properly put your foot down in terms of business development. So as I assume that with the media coverage, we'll get an inkling of when things are more likely to return back to normal, whatever the new normal is. But I spoke to one of my recruitment clients recently, and she works in retail, and they've decided just to furlough they're a boutique agency, so they furloughed the whole business because it just wasn't right. There were, most of their clients have shut anyway, and now wasn't the time in their mind to go out and be all out business development. And I can see that in my industry, just going out and actively selling services might seem a bit gauche if done incorrectly or insensitively, but there will be a time when we hope there's, you know, a much bigger need for our services again. And yeah, where is that sort of bit in the apex of the corner where you put your foot down fully and go for it?
Well, I mean, I think there's a way in which you can do that. And I think that, you know, especially with what you guys do in relation to sort of recruitment marketing, you know, I think there's going out there and there's pushing a hard sale. But I do think that there's an argument for the fact that, you know, people do have a bit more time on their hands at the moment, particularly in the recruitment sector. So what is wrong with actually saying, look, you know, going out there with some free help, free tidbits, maybe an audit of the business and their process and what they're doing at the moment, and really just gathering information ahead of, you know, when things pick up. I think, you know, what I've learned with, you know, I've been doing some business development sort of over the last sort of few weeks, and I think that, yeah, there's going out there and really pushing a sale. But, you know, I think if you understand, you know, the landscape that we're living in at the moment, and, you know, you go in there and it's more a case of, look, when things do improve, we'd love to work with you, but I'd just love to understand a bit more about your business now and about, you know, how you've been working, how we could potentially help moving forward. I think people are more inclined, and they're definitely more available at the moment. So I think that there definitely is an opportunity to reach out to clients if it's done appropriately and done in the right way, because, you know, people do have more time, and, you know, it's an opportune moment to, you know, to check in with people, and especially if you're giving away some free information or some free advice. You know, I think that there's no reason why, you know, you can't go out there and have those conversations now.
Yeah, I totally agree with Paul. I think obviously we're in our sort of space, we're in an interesting world because we're not focusing obviously specifically on recruitment and sort of recruitment practices and people involved in that. That said, when I talked before about you know, the work that the sort of programs that we developed recently around how you sort of work remotely and build virtual teams and lead virtual teams and train your sort of virtual facilitators and all that sort of stuff, we also have within that portfolio recruiting virtually. So, you know, supporting recruiters, interviewers, hiring managers to look at those challenges and opportunities that are involved in remote processes and sort of remote interviews. But going back to what Paul said, yeah, you know, we've been sending out, you know, links to remote working tip sheets and on all those sort of areas. We've hosted a whole raft of sort of webinars over the course of last week and this week, and more planned for next week around the values of sort of virtual training. And we're probably going to have upwards of 250 or so people, which are a mix of sort of clients and sort of prospects that are joining those because they've got the time to do so and can see the value in what we're saying. Yes, they are free, but obviously there's that underlying driver to try and get sort of sales from it, but being very mindful that you can't ram things down people's throat at the present moment in time when it is potentially a very sensitive situation, not necessarily directly for them, but certainly directly for their company and their colleagues within it.
Yeah, and we're working with a couple of interim transformation specialists that we've got very good relationships with, whose longer term work has dried up at the moment, and so are offering their services pro bono to SMEs for a few days. And so we're talking to our clients about how we can link them up, and already some of them have taken up that offer. And in some part that's because those clients are really struggling, and it's still working out how they can mothball the business or keep going on a bare minimum, or in some cases reconfigure their IT systems to work more effectively for them. And whilst obviously we're not making any money out of that at this point, our hope is that you know, in a few months' time, the work that we've done will help us maintain that relationship, or indeed in some cases rekindle a relationship and gain us more paid work in the medium term.
I think that's a really sensible strategy. I think the idea of, you know, there may be clients out there who need people, and they'll take them on now and pay later, perhaps, or services that they would perhaps do that. I think that the light touch, soft touch, education of clients, nurturing of clients. Obviously, you guys are in advanced. You've got lots of sales experience. Jonathan, and your business is very, I suppose, attuned, and you're selling to largely, well, a lot of the time, aren't you? You're working with HR. Who typically an audience that don't like to be sold to.
But, no.
Yeah. So,
but they certainly like being engaged, and I think there's also, I've had a sense, certainly the webinars that we've been running this week, that there's a bit of a sense of people thinking, well, for the first time I'm hearing from people from other organisations, we all sort of know that we're not in it alone, but it's actually quite nice to hear somebody, whether they're Deloitte or they're working for the nuclear decommissioning authority, that they're, we're in it together. And HR people kind of like that sort of engagement and togetherness and support and everything else. So that's a very flippant statement, but you know what I mean.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So I think, does that answer your question, Andy? Have you got some good, useful bits?
I've taken notes. Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Well, thank you, everyone. We've got about a few minutes to go now. Has anybody got anything that they'd like to? Anything they feel? I mean, we've covered some of the sectors. I think we'll be seeing definitely skills like, as you've mentioned, Henry, transformation, tech, process, lean, people with, lean skills, those kind of areas. Perhaps even supply chain recruitment. In fact, I'm going to drop a line to the guy that I've been working with in that area this afternoon, just to see how they're faring. But, obviously mobile communications. Another mate of mine, Andy Burks, who's a Cisco reseller of WebEx, has been like, if I get that coffee, no, I'm drowning in leads and work. He's done more business in the last few weeks than he did in the previous 6 months.
Yeah.
So there are clearly winners in this game, right? And I think this type of platform, and I'm with Jonathan on the learning type platforms and enabling people to create learning environments for themselves with learning platforms, great. But it's also, I'm thinking going back now, another little while, I sort of, and I turned sort of poacher turned a gamekeeper for a while and did some work with Carphone Warehouse, and my wife, her business program, which is a change manager, business transformation recruiter, International Hotels Group asked her to go out to Atlanta for them for a week and do a study of all of their contractor spend and their recruitment spend. I think she came up with literally millions of dollars a year in savings they could make. So, there's that type of thing. If clients are struggling and they're thinking about their recruitment processes and stuff, let's get out there and say, hey, look, if we're not furloughed, I can come and help if you want. I can give you the agency perspective. I wrote a proposal for my brother who's got a small IT recruitment company called Refreshing for Harrods. I'm mentioning all these names, but Scott, is out of the recording. But I wrote for him because he said, look, Ben, I'm not getting into any of these big clients. I wrote this proposal to say, look, we want to collaborate with you. So he goes in monthly, they look at the jobs, and he says the ones he'll be working, and the lady there in charge of recruitment talks about the ones they'll be working, what they'll cover. So maybe she's covering job boards, whatever, and internal advertising traffic, and he's going on to LinkedIn or maybe more for search work. So that sort of collaboration, I think, could work well. And it does exist with some of the training, the talent advisors who are on site, the internal recruiters basically who are on site for organizations. Now, there's a good chance to freshen up our relationships and just, of course, we can't go and see them, but we can do the work virtually, can't we? Possibly.
No, 100%.
All right. Well, thank you all. It's been a small but highly interactive audience. So, I'm mighty glad that all of you joined me. Thank you for that. Thank you to Paul.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you to you, Jonathan and Henry, for your input. And thanks to you, Andy.
Thanks, guys. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good weekend.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.